somewhat accurate. And the difference between the two measurements, GV and GIV, are in the magnitude of 7% or something like that only. It's not very huge. Yeah. So going back to the data builder, now we talked about what are tables and what are views. Now let's see how we can create tables and views in Datasphere. So for tables, so we see only one type of table, which is called a new table. But actually, there are two types of tables. So one is called a local table, and the other is called the remote table. So if you see here, the local table is just looking like the table symbol, whereas a remote table, it has this arrows going in and out. And in the type also, here it says local table, and then it says remote table. Okay. So what is the difference between a local table and remote table? So local table is nothing but inside the data sphere, there is a database, right? So all the objects we are creating in the data sphere are getting saved in that database. So if I create a table locally, that means I am storing that table in my data sphere's database. So the data is physically getting stored inside data sphere itself. Whereas for some reason, maybe I want real-time data, or I don't want to duplicate the data in multiple places. I don't want to waste my data sphere storage. I can decide I want to keep the table remote. So what it does is the remote table then will only have metadata stored inside the data sphere. The actual data will be in the original data source itself. And whenever we are doing a read operation, it will read the data from the source and it will show the data in the data sphere. That way, inside data sphere, we are not consuming any space, or we are not wasting any space redundantly. So that is the difference between a local table and a remote table. Now we'll see how to create a table. So I can click this button, new table, and I can create an empty table from scratch. Right? So it asks certain things. So it asks a name and it asks a technical name. So business names are generally for people, right? People to see and understand, whereas technical names are for storage, for the machine, for uniquely identifying certain things. And in general, for most of the objects, you cannot modify the technical name later, because once it is stored, it is the primary way of the system to identify that object. It should be unique, and most of the time it is not changeable once you create it. Whereas business name, they can be duplicate. You can have multiple things with the same name, and they can be editable. Even after you store it, later you decide to change it, you can change it. Okay, so let's create a table called sales orders. Right, the moment I create a business name, the system automatically assigns a technical name. So later part in one of the sessions, we will see about naming conventions, right? So that we'll stick to a proper naming convention. So it is something to have in your projects. You as a team, even when the project begins, you have to sit and you have to discuss about it. And for example, in our team, we have decided that all tables should start with T. So I can have a naming convention like T underscore will identify all the tables. And whenever I am creating a view, it will be v underscore. Something like that can be a very simple naming convention. And then there can be complicated naming conventions, like I can go, we will have T, which will represent table, and then we have to have the application, so finance, or if it is sales, and then we have to have a table name, so sales order, and then we have to say if it is the first, if we have multiple tables, then we can identify by 0102 like that. So we can have very complicated names also. So again, these names are for technical consultants and for the system. And generally in projects, it's good to have a naming convention so that all the people working on the project will understand, okay, so what is it and what it does. Whereas the business name should be very easy to understand, and it is for the business people. It is not for the technical consultant. Don't have some cryptic names here. Don't have some naming convention going on here. So I see that in project, people are making a mistake. In the business name, they are putting things like, Z, sales order and all. That's not required. and it's not recommended also. So don't do that. Business name should be clear, crisp. It can be duplicate. It should be very short, but it should communicate what this table is about very clearly to anyone, both non-technical and technical person. The naming convention should only be applicable to the technical. Okay, these two fields are clear. Now we have the very popular semantic usage field where people tend to get confused, right? So what is this semantic usage? Before we dive into that, for now, just ignore that. Now let's create a very simple table, right? So to create a table, I have given a name. I have given a technical name. What else I require? I require a structure for the table. So I see a section called columns. So here, if I click this add column button, I can add different columns, right? That's all is required for a table, and I can save the table and I can deploy it. So what is save and what is deploy? Can anyone tell me, like, if you know the difference?
I mean, save will only save your work. Deploy will actually go and create the artifact in the database.
Yes, perfect. So if you are from SAP background, in other tools also you would have seen is a save and activate button, right? So in HANA Studio, in ADT, ABAP development tool, in multiple SAP tools, they have this concept of saving and activating. So why did they split that into two actions is because sometimes when you are working on a very big calculated view or a very big table definition and all, you want to periodically save your work because this is a internet based cloud application, and suddenly if my network connection has a problem, and if I was creating 140 column table, and if I was giving every column a name, a technical name, a data type and all that, and suddenly because of my network glitch for 1 minute it goes and comes off and my work is lost, I'll be angry, right? So the save button is like a check mark. So every now and then I can hit a save button. And in general, it is very quick because there is no database operation going on. It's not creating anything in the backend. It's just saving it in the browser. The first time in the save is like that. But compared to deploy, the save is way faster, right? So every time when I'm doing some work, every now and then, if I want to save my work, so I can save it. Whereas if I want to commit the changes to the database level, I can click the deploy button. That is the time when all the changes I have done will be created as an object. If it is the first time, it is created as an object in the database level, or the existing object will be updated. Compared to save, generally deploy takes more time. So if you are doing work on a very big table, so if you are going to create 100 columns, you are not going to click the deploy multiple times because each time you click, it's going to take a lot of time, and then it can fail also sometime. So it is better, like if you're doing a very long work, you can keep saving every now and then to save your work. So if you save, it is just saving your design time things. So whatever changes you have made here. But once you have done all the changes, you think that the entire table is ready. At that time, you can go and click the deploy button. But once you deploy only, you should be able to use that object anywhere else. So if I want to connect this table, if I want to connect it in a view, if I want to load data to that table, anything, first I have to deploy it. So once I deploy it, it shows a status like deployed, and then it means the table is actually created in the database level and I can start consuming it. So any confusion here between save and deploy?
So
There
when
is
you
no auto
save,
save option, right, Ram?
Yes. So there is no auto save option. Yes.
no, I have one question. So when you save and then you log off and log back in, yeah, that details is still available, or will it go?
It is still available. It will be saved and it will be in not deployed status.
Okay.
And when I have
One
a deployed object, yeah, right.
one more thing, Ram. Any syntax check or error check will happen on save or will happen on deploy?
That's a very good question. It depends, right? So sometimes some of the validation or error messages, if it is design time, it will appear we'll see, like as we progress, it will appear, for example, if I'm making a mistake in a particular thing, it will appear as a highlight even while editing itself, or sometimes when I try to save it, it will appear the error message. But if it is only happening when it goes to the backend, for example, I make a mistake and that particular mistake is not understandable for the design time. Only when it is converted to a SQL statement and it is running in the database level, only the backend is giving that error. Then that error will be surfaced, and that type of error will only happen in the deploy. And sometimes even the validation message will not appear. Only after it hits the database, then only the error message itself will be understandable by the system. So we'll see a short example now itself. So when we discuss about the various fields here, we'll understand. But yeah, so hold on with that question. We'll see that. Yeah, basically I put a note on what is saving and what is deploying. But yeah, if you are all clear, then let's proceed with creating a proper table, right? And then understanding what are the various things here. So here we have a select button. So that is basically useful when you want to multi-select number of things. And for example, I want to delete all of them. I can delete it. And then I have another checkbox here, which is to identify our key fields. So the moment I select something as a key field, you can notice that by default, the system makes it not null. So in some databases, a null key is allowed, right? But in some databases, a null key is not allowed. In HANA, yeah, you cannot have a primary key with a null value. So by default, when I click the column as a key field, then by default, the system is checking the not null value. Meaning, if I try to save data or load data, then it should have some value and it cannot be null. And some of you can ask a question saying that even a primary key field should be unique. And I don't see a button that says unique. That's true. But by default, when you say a primary key, the system will automatically handle it as unique. But if any other column, you don't want it to be a key, but if you just want it to be a unique value, then yeah, there is no separate button here for unique. And any other column, if you want it to be not null, for example, we are creating a sales order table. So the sales order ID will be the key field. Whereas I know for sure that sales order will always have a date. Then that should be not null. I can check that. That doesn't mean that my sales order date, is a key or anything. It just means I should have some value in the date field. I cannot just simply enter null values. Right.
So, Ram,
Now,
two questions here. Before you go ahead. So, one thing you already mentioned, the unique constant, which is hidden. You are saying that if you make a primary key, then it becomes unique automatically. Okay, that is understood. But sometimes you may want to make a column unique, but don't want to make it a primary key.
yeah, that you cannot do. That's what I mentioned.
Cannot do. Okay. Second question is sometimes you have a value constraints, like you don't want the column to have values outside a range. Like, for example, I'm making a discount percentage as a column and I want it to
Mhm.
just have a value between 10 and 30.
Yeah. So even that is not direct. I mean, yeah, that's a question I'll maybe answer later. But the short answer is yes, you cannot specify something like a domain. So in ABAP world, like in the S4 HANA or any ABAP system, we have something called as a domain and a data field. In that, what you said can be done. We can define the length, we can define the domain of values, and we can constrain it, saying that, for example, if gender is a field, then I should make sure that the user enters only male or female, not anything else. Right? That type of control is there in some SAP systems, but out of box in DataSphere, the short answer is no, we cannot control the domain. But later, I will show you at certain places how we can do that. Yeah, maybe we'll discuss that on that later. But yeah, the short answer is no, we cannot constrain it. Okay. Now coming to the other field, we have the important field called data type. Right? So most of these data type you see here, if you are from HANA background, these are all HANA data types, right? So these are all supported in HANA. In general, there are like 4 or 5 data types only. So one is numeric, right? So all the numbers. So in numeric, we have, the real number, the decimal. So the decimal itself has the normal decimal, the decimal float, and the double. So all these are, you know, in the amount of data they can store. And by looking at the symbol itself, you can guess, 1.23. So that means these all supports uh, the numbers with dot notation. So 1 point something, 1.23. All this can be stored in decimal, float, double, HANA real, HANA small decimal, all that. And then we have whole numbers. Like this, again, from the icon itself, it's clear. We have small int, we have tiny int, we have integer, we have int 64, etc. So as a datasphere consultant, it is good for you to understand the uh, various numbers here. I will also, so various data types here. I will also put a link to the various data types. Sometimes it's not directly available in the context sensitive. So I will put a link. You can go and understand what are each of these data types mean, and you can efficiently design a table. For example, small int, it stores only half a byte. It requires only half a byte of storage. At the same time, it can only store values of very minimum. But sometimes, when you know that a particular field has numbers only from 1 to 10, maybe it's a rating field, it will always have numbers only between 1 to 5. Then in that case, it is very efficient to use a small int rather than a integer. Or even better, like if I know that it will only store 1 to 5, I can even use a tiny int, right, to be very efficient instead of just using an integer. But how will I know what stores what? That's where you need to read the documentation and then understand the size, the minimum and the maximum of each of these data types to get the proper design. Okay, so we saw one is, the whole numbers, the other is the numbers with decimal places. And then the other data type is the date and time, right? So we have date time, and then we have time and timestamp. So 4 of these different date types are there. And we have Boolean, which is like 0 or 1. And we have blobs, binary large objects. So for storing very large text data, for storing images, things like that. So that for that we use binary and HANA binary, etc. And then we have UUID, so unique identifiers. So that is again one data type. And so for all these data types, you can go in to the documentation, read it, and maybe in the next session you can ask me questions if you have specific questions about each of this data type. But yeah, most of the data type, I hope you will understand from the looking at the symbol itself. Only thing is, by heart, you should know at least which is smaller and which is larger. You don't have to know the exact limits. At least you should know, okay, so I'm just going to store 1 to 5 in the number. Which should I use? So is tiny smaller than small, or is small smaller than tiny? So the order, if you read it once, you will remember that. So now coming to the length. So yes, so for example, for some of the fields like this string, so if I select time, see, there is nothing. If I select integer, there is nothing. When I select string, it asks me for the length. So that in that type of data set, again, I can give a string length, and it is good to give a proper length. By default, it always takes 100 as the length. In the HANA level also, it uses a very efficient data type only. It uses varchar, n varchar, and by default, it will not waste space. So you can arbitrarily go to a very high number also. So it's not that great that you break your head thinking which number I should use. So I would say don't waste your time in thinking, okay, so what are all the values that's going to put here? But I would say if you know that, most of the strings are going to be short, then keeping the default 100 makes sense. But if you have if you have a text column where you know for sure that it's going to have a very large value, then maybe you can increase it to a large value so that it can accommodate that value. So yeah, that is the data type column. And then we have something called as the default value, right? So this default value, to explain that, let's have multiple columns. So we have one uh, string, we have one integer column, and then maybe, yeah, I'll keep it string only. So sales orders generally can be numeric and sometimes they can be alphanumeric. Sales order date, we'll select the date column, and then we'll have sales order quantity. So quantity again, it can be numeric, it can be a whole number, and then let's have sales order amount, right? And that can be also numeric, but it can be decimal because amounts can be decimal. So again, when I select decimal, it asks me for a precision and scale. I'm okay with 5 and 2. So I'm giving that. And if I want, I can give other data types also. So maybe Boolean or something, right? So I have a couple of columns. So I will say delivered as a flag, right? So now we have this default value. The text association we'll see later. For that, we have to understand several concepts before to come to that. For now, you ignore this text association. I am talking about this default value column. So for a primary key, you cannot have default values because each time it will be unique and it will be incremented. But for all the other fields, you can have default values. So for example, for sales order date, I want to, anytime when someone tries to enter the data, the current date should be by default the default date. So I can either put a hard coded value, or I can use the current date, or I can select a particular date also. So I will use current date as my default value so that whenever someone tries to enter a sales order, the current date will be the default value, but they can override it. We'll see what the default value does. But for now, I'm setting it as the current date. For quantity, by default, 1 will be the quantity. And amount, I don't want any default values because different products can have different amount. So by this, they should enter an amount. So I am saying that not null because I want them to enter an amount. So it should be not null. And delivered or not delivered, by default, I'm saying when you are creating a sales order, it is not delivered. So it takes some days to get delivered. So I am saying the default value is false. So I have made certain default values. So where will they take effect? So let's see that. For that, let's deploy the changes. So in general, when I am working on very short things, I do not always click save and deploy. I see that some people always click save and deploy. It's not required. You can directly deploy. Only when you are working on a very large thing and you are scared that something can happen in between and I will lose my changes, that's where you need save. You need to keep clicking save once in a while. But it's not like every time you need to deploy, you have to save and deploy. You can directly click the deploy button. Okay. So now we have deployed our changes and it says deployed on and the time is also recent. So now we have a button here called data editor. So when I go to data editor, let's wait. Okay. So now we have this data editor where I can create new record. So when I click the add button, you see the default values are taking effect. So the quantity, automatically it is showing the default value. The delivered, it is automatically showing the default value. But you can question me, you even put the sales order date, the current day as the default value, but why is it not showing? Did I put the current date? Right? I put the current date, right? But why is it not showing? So now let me enter a sales order ID and then let me try to save it. Okay, amount is not null. So I will give 10 and then I'll save it. You see here, now the date got populated. It's kind of a HANA function or a backend function. At that time when the record is getting inserted, the system is calculating the current date and it is putting the current date as the default value. Whereas these values are hard coded, like if you put a string as a default value or a number as a default value or a boolean as a data default value, there is no calculation involved. So they will be, whenever you are adding new record, they will be auto populated. Whereas the date, even though it doesn't appear here, if you don't pass any values for a date, like if you don't hard code some values, the system will, at the query execution time, it will automatically substitute the default value if you have put the current date as your default value. And yeah, so this is basically the data editor. Most of the time you will not require to edit the data like this. You will be loading the data, so we'll see how to do data load and all. But for now, when we are creating a table, this is how you can enter the data. So I have entered a lot of records, and for some of them I can say different things, and I can save it. Yes, so bunch of records we have created. If we don't want, I can delete certain records from here. And if I want to duplicate one record, I can click the duplicate. It will duplicate a bunch of records also together. Only thing is it's a primary key, so it's giving warning saying that it should be unique, right? So I just make it as 6, 7, right? Okay, so now if I want to, if I made some changes and I want to get my original values back, then I have this restore button. But the thing is, so if you see here, these are all the new records, the blue ones. The green ones are all existing in the database, but I have made the changes. But this restore button will erase, it will not only restore my changes, but it will also lose the new records. So it's not that great, not that useful. Like you can just click the browser refresh and it will achieve the same thing. But yeah, there is a refresh button. So it is warning you saying that all unsaved changes will be lost. So when I say continue, so you see all my new records were also lost and my change record was also lost. And that's one interesting thing, to see, understand this color coding, right? So this blue means it's a new record you are creating, and if it's a green, it's an existing record and you have made some changes. And the restore button, irrespective of what type of change, it will just bring back what is in the database and show it here. So if you have messed up with some value and if you want to go back, you can just click the restore button. And then unfortunately I did not add any string columns. So let's go back and add a string column, and then I can explain what does this do. So any questions here in the table monitor? Okay, so let's go back to the table editor, and I want to add one more column, and let's call it delivery note, and let it be string, and everything else deploy. So let's go to data editor. Now you see here, like whenever I create a new record or in the existing record also, I have a column for delivery note where it says enter a string, right? And if I do not enter a string, how should it handle it, right? So for that, we have a setting here, right? So which says if I enter a string, then it's clear. But if I do not enter a string, so that missing value, should it be considered a null or an empty string? And why does that matter? Right? So I'll show that what is the difference. Like in a database level, null means the value is unknown, whereas a empty string means you just, when you are inserting a record, if you put two quotes without any space or any character between the quotes, that is an empty string. So you are saying that the value is not known, the value is empty. So there is a subtle difference at the database level, right? So in case you want to insert explicit null, by default it is the setting, but in case all that missing value you want the system to consider it as empty string, you can change this and you can put it as empty string, and when you hit the save button, I didn't make any changes. So if I hit the save button, then in the database, when it was inserting this particular record, this particular value for delivery note, it would have put insert, and in the values it would have put explicit null. If I have selected this option in the query, it will put an two quotes without anything, right? So now let's go back to the table editor, and I want to show you one setting, which is if I make some changes and if I save that changes, now there is a difference between my deployed version and the saved version, right? Because in the deployed version I have only this many columns, and in the saved version now I have an extra column, and it will show the status like this. It will say changes to deploy, and at this point you can do two things. So one is you can deploy and all your changes will be deployed, or sometimes if you want to go back to the last deployed version, you have this button that says restore deployed version, so I can go back to my last deployed version. So why do I need that, or when do I need that? So again, when you click that restore the deployed, it will show changes to deploy, because again it expects you to click that deploy button once, or you can go out of the screen without making any. So why do you require that restore button? Maybe sometime you had a very good table which was deployable, or a view that was deployable, and you did not have any syntax error or anything. But now, for example, I made some error. So I know that delivery note in all my records are null, right? And now I am saying that it should be not null. And when I try to deploy this, what will happen is, because already there are some records and they contain null value, the system will not allow this. So it's saying deployment in progress. And now you see it says deploy failed. Null value found when changing to not null in the table, right? So now the problem is, I made the mistake. It's a very simple mistake. I can go and uncheck it. That's one thing. But if I don't know, like I have made this mistake, then here basically I'm stuck. Now I know that, okay, so the delivery note contains null value. I want to go to data editor, but it is not allowing me. It is saying that you must deploy a revert, right? And to do that, yeah, if it's a simple change, yeah, it's just you can remove the check mark. But if there was multiple changes, instead of going and reversing all your changes, you can click the restore deployed button, and it will go back to the last version which was deployed. It will undo all the changes for you. So yes, you have step-by-step undo buttons and redo button at the top. That also you can do. But if you want to undo all the things that you've done until the last deploy, you can use that button that appears there. So any questions so far on that table? Okay,
So
clear.
one question from my end, like see, now you are creating a table in DataSphere directly, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my point is like, suppose DataSphere, the sources might be S4 or some other SAP or non-SAP system, where already the respective data, database table and its structure is available already. Okay.
Yeah.
So now
We'll come to that. We'll come to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I understand where the question is going. We'll come to that. We'll connect to different sources. We'll see how to get the data, all that. Yes. This is a very simple
I'm
table.
saying not only data, can't we import the structure directly from the source instead of creating manually one by one? Can we import the
Yes.
structure also?
We can.
Okay.
Okay. So on this local table, empty table creation, any questions? Yeah.
Is it the SQL console for to create the SQL queries? Like the SQL query create a table name.
No, for view, yes, there is a SQL console. I mean, there is a SQL based view, but
Mhm.
like HANA, there is no SQL console where you can freely run any queries. But later we'll see at the space level how we can create a user that has write access. But again, it will be in a separate schema where you will not be directly creating in the spaces data space schema itself. So we'll see that. But yeah, to answer, no, there is no SQL console to run any query. So there are certain places where we can write SQL, and then there are certain places where we can at least see the SQL that the system is generating. But for table, yes, there is no SQL create you can do.
In that case, like if I have a columns like 100 columns or 320 columns, if you take the S4HANA tables, they might
Mhm.
be having a huge like more than 100 columns, right?
So, like
So,
someone said, most of the time in DataSphere, we'll not be having a situation where we'll be creating local tables manually. Very rarely, right? So most of the time, like you said, it will be S4 table or it will be VW table somewhere. So there we'll not be creating the structure ourselves. The structure will also get replicated here. So there 100 columns you don't have to create manually.
yeah.
Okay.
So Ram,
So
that null thing, default null, is only applicable for string type, or can we also do it for other data types?
that's only for string type. In the data editor,
Okay.
you are saying, right?
Yeah, yeah. Where you were saying any column not defined. Uh,
Yeah.
I think you said you can put it as null.
Yeah. That is for only string type. Okay, let it deploy. Yeah, that is for only string type. So now let me explain all these buttons that the table has also. So, save as, deploy. Sharing, we already discussed at the space level. So if you want this table or any object you are working on to be shared, you can share it with the other spaces. But yeah, you cannot control the access because the objects are only editable in their original space. In all other spaces, it's read-only access. And then you have the data previewer. So if you click that in a table or view, if there is data, then it will show a preview like this here. And we have undo and redo button. So if you are making some changes and if you want to undo the change, you can undo it. You want to redo the change, you can redo it. Right? And then we have export. So we'll come to what is a CSN notation uh, a little later. But yeah, to export this table definition, like we have defined the table, right? So I have given a table name, I have given the columns, the data type, etc. So if I want all of that information to be exported, I can export it. It will export as a JSON file, but it is a special type of JSON. So SAP has a notation called CSN, which is a special type of JSON. So we'll get into a little bit detail into that later. But yeah, so it will basically export the entire metadata of that particular object. So if you see that, see it will look like the definition. This is the technical name that we given, and the kind is entity. So table according to it is entity, and then it contains a lot of elements. So it is going element by element. So there is a sales order, and the label of sales order is sales order, and type is string, length is 100. It is key. It is not null. So basically, whatever definition I have done here, it is exported as a JSON file. Okay? That is this export JSON. And why do we use it? We can like we export it, we can import it. So if you want to import this in another space to create a similar table, or if you want to export it and import it in another system, that also you can do. So to export objects definition and to import it somewhere, SAP uses a special notation which is called CSN. It is a form of JSON. So now coming to this button. This is for uploading data. We'll see it in a bit, how to create an empty table. And then if you have CSV file, instead of going into data editor and then giving one record at a time, I can have a local file, a CSV file with a lot of records, and then I can just load it using this button. And we have hierarchies. So we'll see later with tables that contain hierarchy how we can use this. And then we have delete all the data. So we saw that we have couple of records, right? So we have 4 records, I guess. And if I want to export the CSN, I can do from here also. Some people get confused that this export button, they are thinking that this is for exporting the data. No, from the data preview, you are not exporting the data. Again, it is exporting JSON only. So if I go here, so you see here, it is exporting the exact JSON that we exported earlier, right? So don't confuse this button because it appears in data preview as the data export button. And this is a full view because sometimes when you have a lot of records, it will only sample anyways 1000 records. But sometimes this 4-5 records is not enough. So you can go full view and you can see all that records. And sometimes you want to adjust because there will be many columns in the table. You might want to see only few columns. You can adjust that. And also you can define a sort order and filter and everything in the data preview. But coming back to my original point, if I want to delete all the data in a table, I can click this button and then it will delete all the data in my table. So it's completed. So now if I do a data preview, it will have nothing. So it will have 0 records. And finally,
it's always a full data deletion, Ram. It's never a selective data deletion, right?
Yes, it is a full data deletion. Yes. So you cannot define a criteria and delete. And now we have something called as edit custom CSN annotation. Before we go to that, we'll not deep dive into that, but we'll see what that means. But before we go to that, even you have to understand what is a CSN and so on. So we already saw what is a CSN. This JSN notation which gets exported is the CSN. And then in that, what are annotations? These things that begin with this @ symbol, right? So if you have worked with CDS view and all, or in Java or Python, any programming language, you would have used annotation. So annotations basically begin with this @ symbol, and then they have a special meaning for that particular language parser, right? So for the CSN parser, CSN annotations have special meaning. So if you know what are CSN and what are annotations, and if you want to add some custom annotation rather than the system generated one, then you can add that annotation. What it will do is whenever someone is exporting annotations, it will, whenever someone is exporting the CSN, it will also include your custom annotations. We'll see a little bit, but not too much, a little bit, and I'll show you the CSN documentation you want to, if you're interested to deep dive how to do. But yeah, that is that button. And this is the lineage button we already saw. So if you click that in any object, it will show all the connected objects, but this is a standalone table. So far we are not connected. So it is not. So that is the local table in the data sphere. Now, to make things interesting, they have this semantic usage in the data sphere. So in a database level, a table is table, right? Nothing else. There's a storage where you store data in rows and columns. That's all. That's what the database wants to understand. Whereas in a data warehouse, you are building a semantic layer on top of it. Semantic meaning itself is meaning only, right? So you are adding meaning to data. So they have something called as a semantic usage. And here is a big list. Don't get intimidated, right? So there are a lot of things going on here. But basically, you are trying to tell the system and the people looking at it what you intend to do with the data. And sometimes clicking on each of them will give you different options also. Not sometimes, every time when you click on them, it will give you a different option. And also, for example, if I click fact, right? So immediately you see that it changes to attributes and measure. Whereas earlier when I was in relational data set, it was just columns. And it is not showing rows because if we design columns, if you go to the data editor, automatically you are just adding rows of data, right? So the only thing you define in creating a table is column. Whereas if I go to fact, it changes to attributes and measures. And same way, if I go to analytic data set, it is attribute and measure. Right? So what are all these things and what do they mean? Right. So as we start using it, yes, you will get a deeper understanding. But to define each of them, I have a slide here or a document here. Right. So the primary two things you want to understand are the relational data set and the analytic data set. So what is a relational data set? That is the default option. So the semantic usage is not only for tables. So even when you create a view, it will ask for the semantic usage. So when creating a table or view in Datasphere, you can specify the semantic type. Right. So what it does is it will provide additional information about your intended use, and it will also change certain options that appear. Right? So by the two main things you have to understand are analytical dataset and relational dataset. Relational dataset is the default option. So if you don't change anything, by default, it is considered relational dataset. So what is a relational dataset? It's nothing but a table. It has no special meaning. If you don't have any special meaning, when you are creating a table or a view, you can keep it relational dataset. It means a collection of columns and rows. That's all. Right? It has no other special meaning, and it is not relevant for analytic purpose, or it is not directly consumed in analytic. Maybe you are going to use in somewhere else. Right? Whereas analytic dataset is especially built for analytic purpose. So you're going to have measures and you're going to have attributes. So that's why the moment you change it to analytic dataset, it will show attributes and measures. Recently, not very recently, maybe a couple of updates back, they have SAP has decided to deprecate the analytic dataset, meaning it is not recommended anymore to use analytic dataset. Maybe in old customer tenants, you will still see some analytic datasets, but from now on, it is being called as fact. Right. So in the semantic type, you will see that it is being called as fact. So fact is nothing but an analytic dataset only. So it is used for analytic purposes, and in fact table, always it should have at least one or more measure. So at least it should have one measure. So I cannot have an analytic data set without having a measure, because I am saying the system, I am going to use this for analytic purpose. For using it in analytics, I should have at least one measure. So that's what a fact table is. And then we have these special uh, tables, right? Which are all nothing but they are all useful for the fact table. They are adding more meaning to the fact table. We have a dimension table, text table, and previously there were only hierarchies. Later they also introduced something called as hierarchy with directory. So let's understand one by one what is a dimension table. Right, a dimension table is nothing but all the attributes of a particular dimension, say customer or product, anything. It will have a lot of attributes, right? A customer will have uh, company name, contact person, email ID, address, all that, right? So all these attributes will be collected under a dimension table. And then there will be some text that at analytics time you might want to translate, right? So you want to handle the text in a separate table so that they become translatable, right? For example, you have product ID and then product description. So if you keep the product ID and description as a simple dimension table, then yes, you can keep it. But sometimes you want the description to be relevant to the customer's login language, right? So for example, if someone in US opens it, it should appear in English. If someone in Spain opens it, it should appear in Spanish, like that, right? Then you can separate the descriptions and put it in a special table called the text table, where it supports this type of multiple language uh, translations. And then we have hierarchy tables. So we have all these attributes in an entity, and we want to define kind of a parent-child relationship between these attributes. So we want to say, okay, so he is the manager and under him these are all the employees. Or you want to say, okay, this is the parent category, product category, and then maybe these are all the sub products. Like that, if you want to define a parent child hierarchy, then you use this hierarchy table. And then we have a somewhat a new concept which is called hierarchy with directory. So when you have one or more parent child hierarchies and you want to maintain a directory structure and a directory information to handle it, we'll use this hierarchy with directory. So all these are just options that you select here. Don't get intimidated. Only thing I want you to understand is by default everything is relational data set, and relational data set is nothing but a table. And if you decide you are going to use something directly for analytics, you will use fact, because analytic data set is not to be used anymore. So it is replaced by the fact. So all these other things we will see one by one with examples probably in tomorrow's session, and understand, okay, when to use what exactly and what is the benefit that they add when it comes to reporting. So whenever we are doing one of this, inside Datasphere, you will not feel where the impact is. So whenever you are creating one of this, you should open SAC and you should open a story to understand, okay, so if I design it in such a way, what happens in the reporting, right? So these are applicable for both tables and views. So any questions on this, any of this usage?
So Ram, two questions. If I don't need a translatable text, so in that scenario, can I just have the text within my dimension as a column? That was the first question. And does do we support level-based hierarchy also apart from parent-child?
Yes. So both are good questions. Yeah. The first question, like I said, if you don't want translatable text, or you want very simple, okay, I have an ID and I have a description, that's all. Yes, you can have it directly in the dimension table. But in SAC, there are certain text association features. Even though you're not going to use translation, in SAC by default, if you have a column called product, right? By default, SAC is tuned to show the description. But if you just model it as a dimension, and if you keep ID and description as two columns, this text association will not happen. And because of that, what happens is in SAC, you will see two dimensions now. One dimension called product ID, another dimension called product text. And it's kind of annoying to, create charts. People will expect just to see one dimension called product, and when they drag and drop it, the system to automatically understand text. So that is a minor inconvenience. So I would say, even though if the text is not translatable, if you know that it's going to be used in analytics, then don't mind spending few more minutes to create a text
So
table.
basically, the reason I asked this is, so basically I'm forced to always have a text table. Otherwise, I cannot, it's not a meaningful analytics at the consumer end. Whatever tool I'm using at the front end.
Exactly. So it is kind of a soft way of forcing you to always do text. Yes. And the other question, yes, level-based hierarchies are not directly supported. Only parent-child hierarchies are supported. And the difference of level-based and parent-child, will come to that when we are talking about SAC, so that everyone, I don't know if everyone already understands it. So we will discuss a little bit of what they are and when they are used, and what is supported in Datasphere and what is not.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other questions from anyone? Okay, so if not, I'll quickly show you the second way of creating a table, which is somewhat quicker. And for this, I would want you to download any one of this data files. So can anyone confirm if you can access this already?
Actually, I need access for that. So I have requested for it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have also done it. I don't have. I registered for the training using my Hotmail account. Maybe that's why I don't have access. I've also requested it using my Gmail ID now.
Just give me 1 minute. Let me make it even public. There is no sensitive information there so that everyone can access it. Restrict the. Yeah. So I would say refresh now and you all should be able to access it.
Which one
Yeah,
you're talking? Did you ping any link?
Yeah, in the chat I pinged 2 links. So I'm talking about the first link, DSP.
I did not see that link actually. Can you ping me again if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure.
Please ping second link as well.
Okay, so go ahead and download any one of the files, right? I'm going to download the business partner.csv, right? So it's downloaded. So now what happened to my data space? Okay, so now if you go
For
here,
the second link, it's showing access to.
for second link, I don't have access to give you because that is a file which Ankit has even shared with me. So probably I think it is shared with me by Ankit, so I cannot control the access there. Maybe you have to write a mail to Ankit for that.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think if you write a mail, he'll give you. He will add you quickly, and I'll also tell him to make this also public, maybe. But yeah, he might have reservation saying that it's classified. So, see, yeah, write a mail to Ankit for that, and you will get that. That's just the session notes anyway. So okay. So now with the file, now we have some type of data. So I don't want to build the table myself. I want the system to build it. So what I can do is I can go to import and then I can say import CSV file. And we can select our this business partners file. And you can leave the column as a headers because this file which I shared has a header. But if you are using some other CSV file, just make sure if you have header, select this. Don't have a header, don't select it. And by default, the system is smart enough to see what is your separator automatically. Very rarely it goes wrong with certain data sets. In that case, you can let the system know what exactly is your CSV delimiter. So I am leaving it auto detect and I say upload. Now the file actually loads from my PC to the cloud and then it opens in this data builder. This tool is called data builder. So in this it opens up and here we can do certain transformations and certain transpose if required, right? So for example, if I want to create a transformation, these are all the transformations that are available, right? So most of them are string functions, right? With any other data type, they will not work. So for example, concatenation is for concatenating two strings. Split is for splitting one column into two columns. Extract is for extracting a particular value. Replace is for replacing a particular value. Change case is for changing the case, etc. So let's see one by one. So there are two ways to do the transformation. So one is I can just click the transformation bar and then start writing my transformation. Or the other is I can select a particular column. For example, I can select the email ID column. And then if I click the transformation bar and for example, change case, by default, the system populates the column, right, which makes it easy for me. So it by default it took the column name without selecting the column. So if I didn't have the column selected, right, so I would have to fill the value. So another way of doing it is, so if you are working at a cell level, so for example, if I want to replace all the partner ID 2 with 1, then I can even click the cell level, and then here is a smart proposal. So if I, here is a proposal, that's a column level proposal. It will have general things like a column level transformation or column duplicate or column delete, etc. Whereas this at the bottom is the cell level proposal. So I can do something like, I want to replace all the 2s with 1. Then I can replace it, right? So basically there are different transformations, right? So if you are from a SAC, this is the exact same screen in the SAC. So you can write transformation directly from the transformation bar. If you have a column selected, it will automatically apply to that particular column. And if you have a cell selected, the system can sometimes propose smarter things to do, right? So now coming to some of this, for example, if I want to split the text in this column, wherever there is a space, or even better, split the text in this column, wherever there is a slash, right? So I can go here, I can say split on slash. The system is proposing it. So I can also preview what is going to happen. So when I say split on slash, so it's going to split into 2 columns. Now at the same way, I can select this 2 columns, and then I can go here, and then there is a concatenate, and then concatenate using space. So I don't want space. I want to concatenate again using a slash only. So I can go here, what our system is proposing, and then I can modify it. Say I want to concatenate with the slash. And again, always a live preview is going on so that I can verify what I am getting is what I want. So once I'm satisfied, I can enter. I can click that, and that will create the transformation. So whenever we are doing transformations like this, things can go wrong. So you can always use the undo and redo button, or you can check the transformation log. And if you have a column selected, it will show the transformation log only for that column. If you see the entire data sets transformation, then you can see whatever we have done so far, and you can undo it. So you can just click the X and it will undo certain transformations. So that is basically the transformation builder here. I don't want to go into each of that. You can understand it, most of it, and you can try it yourself as well. And once I'm happy with all the data loading and transformations that I do, I can click the deploy button. And now I have to fill the table's business name and the technical name. So I can say deploy. Technical name already exists, so let me make it 2. Or even business name. Yeah, let's have duplicated business name. Just the technical name, it says already exists. So now what will be the type of this table? Anyone?
Relational data set.
Yes. It will be a relational data set. Yeah, the business partner too. So if you see here, most of the columns, it would try to put either as integer or string, and it is smart enough. If you have dates, it will find the dates as well. But it is not very smart, like if you put specific field like zeros and ones, and if you expect it to be boolean and all, it might not do that. So always after creating a table from a file, it is good to come here and verify that, right? So you want to just verify once, okay, partner ID, is it an integer? Yes. Partner role? Yes. Like that. And for example, in this case, partner role is either 1 or 2, very small integer. I feel like int 64 is a overkill. I can come here, I can make it a tiny int if that's what I want, like that. So after you create a table, come here, just do a verification. And also, it will not set any keys when creating the table. So if you want to set key, you have to again come here and you have to set the key. These are 2 things you have to do after you create a table using a file. And if you do a data preview, it should be able to show all the data that got loaded now. Right. So this is another way of creating a table. So I did not create the table manually, but I loaded a file and that created a table, right? So another way to create a table and load the data is like we saw that we can create a table, directly from scratch, right? So the another way to create it is, so let's assume that someone, gave me a CSN file. So I export the CSN file for the business partner. So now let's assume someone gave a CSN file and we are importing the CSN file. I'll go to a different space and import it in round one, maybe. So again, in the import button, first is CSV, the second is CSN. So now I can import the CSN file. And what you need to understand is the CSN file has only the structural information, right? So it does not have the data itself, right? So we saw the content of the CSN file. This is the entire CSN file, right? So if you see here, it has only the structural information. It does not have any records or anything. So what happens is, so I'll only import the business partners. Now you see here, business partner is a local table. It got imported. It imported other two things also, sales order and sales order item. That's okay. We leave it. But for here, if you see in the business partners, it is showing not deployed and it does not have any, if it is not deployed, there is no database level artifact itself. So it will obviously not have any data. So if I go and see the data preview, it will not have any data. And why it came up with all the other thing is, I will explain it to you later. So there is a concept called ER modeling in DataSphere. So in that other space, this business partner had some entities which it is related to. So when I exported the CSN file, all those was also captured in that CSN file. So if I open it, so you will see that. So see, there is an entity called business partner. And if I come here, it will also have association, right? So with the other entity, sales order and sales order ID and everything, right? So that's why it came when I loaded, it asked me, okay, so all these three are ready to be imported. And then that's why it all came together. So what I wanted to show you is, okay, you can import a CSN file. That means all the metadata is captured, but you have to come and manually deploy it for the table to actually get created. And after that, the data will not be there. See here, there is no data load button. Only after you deploy a table, you will get the data load button. So now we have a data upload button. So I can upload my data now. So I have the business partner CSV file. So this is where if you have a table already, you are not trying to create the table with data, but you have the table. Maybe you manually created the table, the structure, everything, or you imported a CSN file and that created the structure. In any case, you have a table. Maybe that's a table where you need to, upload new data every week or something. So that's where you can put a CSV file, and then again you have all the same options like the row header and everything. And you just have to verify the column mapping is correct. So this is our column. This is the table, like the CSV column, and this is the column from our table. So you have to make sure that they are matching. And then when you say import, the system will import the data. If the import is successful.
So one query here. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hello.
Suppose you have created this table and then imported the data. Okay.
Mhm.
So later, like suppose there are so many ways, like so many cases, like we need to change the structure. Like we may need to add a few columns, maybe after a few months, or we don't know. Like it is a casual scenario. Like we need to add a column. So
yeah, so we'll see that. So we'll see that later. Yeah,
okay.
It's covered actually. Okay, I see your point. Yes, it's not
my point
very
is
frequent,
like adding
but
a
yeah,
field
it
is fine,
happens.
but No, my point is adding a field is fine. Then how to handle the data? Suppose I want to update only specific column, then it's fine. I no need to worry about the other fields. But so if it is not allowed, like say, updating a specific field in all the rows existing, then in that case I need to delete all rows and then again upload the whole data.
No,
So
we'll
how
see
we
that. We can substitute a constant value, or how we can handle it, we can see that. That's a great question, but it is already answered like in the later content. So we'll see that then. Okay. So we have seen,
So Ram, maybe I'm just going ahead, but this table is dependent to business partners, right? I mean,
this is business
why?
partner table. It is
Sorry,
dependent on
I mean
sales
the
orders.
sales order, correct. So why doesn't anything show up in? It will show up in dependent objects if we go to the tab dependent
It's not
objects.
dependent. It is associated. That's why the word association. So it will show up on association. Dependent means like the data should come for this from somewhere, or the data here is used somewhere. That data level lineage should be there.
So if there is a view on this, then it will show me in the dependent objects.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So now
also it followed basically the CDS view architecture most probably.
Yes. Yeah, everything is old wine in a new bottle. But yeah, if you can see through that and see the serious view definition, yeah, probably that's what they are doing in the backend HANA, I guess. But yes. Okay. So now table is clear, right? So now let's go into the views. So now we have created a table, right? So we will be creating multiple tables like that. And then we might want to combine those tables. But for now, we'll take a very simple situation where we have one table and then I want to create one view on top of that. But in future, we'll be going into details of create why we require a view. So now, yeah, don't think like we have one table, why I have to put it in a view. The view, like we discussed, the purpose is to combine data from multiple tables, to create calculated columns, to filter, uh, to apply aggregation, all that we'll do later. But how to create a simple view? So I can create a simple view in two ways. So for example, if I am an SQL expert, right, I can go ahead and I can write my SQL and I can create my view. But yeah, let's not start there because some of you might get scared. So we'll dive into SQL tomorrow. We'll start with very simple queries and build the SQL knowledge, and then we'll create using SQL view. But for now, I would say this has become easier because with tools like ChatGPT and everything, you can just write a natural language. It gives a query, you just run it here. So it has become that easy. And I hope in future, maybe, in DataSphere also, they bring in inbuilt AI where you just tell it in natural language and it generates the SQL, right? So now the SQL previously, maybe 1 or 2 years or even 3 years back, people were scared because they might not know SQL. Now you don't have to be scared. Now the playing field is equal for everyone. You just have to define the problem in English and then it'll give you the SQL. Right? So that's also now very easy. Now let's see a very simple graphical view. So when I go to this graphical view, this is the designer where we can create the actual view. So for view, what is required is a couple of source tables or source views. Okay? The tables and views, the symbol is slightly different. This is a table, just rows and columns, and this is a projection. So there is a big table in behind, and then there is a small projection. So that is the symbol for view. And this is a remote table. So we have not seen what is a remote table yet. But for now, understand they are virtual tables. So only metadata is in DataSphere. There is no actual data storage. Tomorrow we'll see how to create these virtual tables from BW or any other connection. And then we'll get into details of that. But for now, to create a view, you can create it on top of some source. That source can be tables, either local or remote, and they can also be other views, right? So I can drag and drop this. Just when I drag my first table, the output, there is already something called as view one. That's nothing but the view that we are trying to create. So when I click that view, the properties of that view appear. So in the table editor, we have seen the properties, right? Like the business name, the technical name, the schematic type, everything. So same things will appear for a view. So even here, the semantic usage is the same. So only difference is view can be a collection of tables, right? That's the only difference. But the semantic usage, we are just saying that I'm going to use this view as a relational data set or as a fact or as a text like that, right? So that doesn't change. A view is, you can think of view is very similar to a table. Only thing is it can be a collection of tables or a collection of views, and it doesn't store data, etc. But in the definition wise, yeah, you can give a business name. I'm just going to call it business partner view, and then technical name, and the status will change when we deploy it. And semantic usage, we already seen it. And then we have something called as expose for consumption, and we'll come to this later. But for now, if you click that button, what happens is this view will be exposed to be consumed in your reporting tool like SAC or Power BI or anything. So if you click expose for consumption, this view can be consumed in your reporting tools. That's all. But there are a lot of technicality here. So selecting a particular semantic type and clicking the expose will expose it in a different way. Sometimes you can only connect through OData. Sometimes you can directly connect through DataSphere connection. All that we have a later session. But for now, yeah, this button means this view will be exposed for reporting tools. And then run in analytical mode, again, only when you expose for consumption, that will become available. So that is for performance optimization. So it is always good to enable that whenever you are exposing for consumption. It's always good to enable that, especially when you have unions, because it has HANA level optimization. Especially when you have unions, if you check this button, it will run an optimized query. So if you don't have unions, it doesn't hurt to turn this on. So I would say if you are exposing for consumption, you can turn it on. So either it will boost your performance or it will do nothing, but negatively it will not do anything to it. And status, yeah, once we deploy it, it will get changed. We'll see that, and validation messages will also appear. But other than that, here we have a lot of columns. So in a view, sometimes you might not require all the columns. So for example, I want only partner ID. I don't want role. I don't. I want to set the partner ID as a key, and then I want to have certain additional columns. Now I want some calculations, etc. Then how do I do that? So if I go here, if I click the previous node, right? So you see here, there are certain things I can do. There are filters, there are, column renaming or excluding columns, or simply put projections. So if you are writing a SQL, right, this will be your select and the column names list. And rename is nothing but as an alias name, right? And then this filter is nothing but your where condition. And this calculations can be direct, SQL functions. And then you have aggregation, which can be some aggregation function with the group by class. And you have joins. So if you want to connect multiple tables, you can use joins. And then you have data viewer. So if you click that, any node that supports data preview, it will show the data preview live. And then you have lineage analysis, and you directly can jump to that particular object. So sometimes while you're editing a view, you will suddenly remember, oh, I want to change something in the table. So you can click open a new tab and you can jump there. See? So now without any changes.
One question here. I mean, maybe you would explain it in session ahead, but just wanted to ask, what is the recommendation? First, we create a view on the table and take all the field as is, and then do a second, whatever the options you were showing, like projection, calculated column, we should do it on the second view, or we should do it on the table?
Not required. You can directly do it on, so that boils down to the project implementation group, right? So SAP recommends to keep the layering very minimal, right? So even in the BW for HANA, they went from layered scalable to layered scalable plus plus, where they removed all the intermediate layer. So same thing here also. So here also they recommend to keep the layers minimal. But with that said, I have seen, at the customer places, people handling it differently. Like you said, I have seen that exact practice where wherever there is a single table, they'll put it as a view, and then that view will be consumed in the further layer. And I have asked the reason, and I have discussed the reason with those architects, and I have worked in teams. And the reason is that it provides kind of a cushioning layer. So every time the customer wants a small change, you don't have to touch the table which stores stuff physically, right? So if it is a very structural change, yes, you might have to touch the table. But sometimes if they if they ask, okay, can you do this one more column, or can you do this, can you do that, then it kind of acts like a cushioning. So it actually boils
Yeah.
down to how you want to layer your reporting solution. So sometimes
Yeah, got the point, Raman. That was the whole reason of asking. But another reason I think it should be why a view should be used in the upward consumption is because if you change the column names, for example, let's say at the table layer, then you don't have a way of identifying what was the original and what is the new, right? I mean, because it
yeah
will be changed.
yeah
So if you have
Maybe
a
maybe
table as it is,
yeah
yeah. One
and
additional thing
then
I want to add here.
hmm
Suppose there are simple cases where suppose we have a column like first name and last name as two columns, and but user want to see the column together as a full name, right? So table level we don't basically create an extra column for with calculation and then do it. So creating a view gives additional like help for us. Like we can do that those calculations at view level, and that way we can propose it to the user for consumption.
No, that
I
is
will.
agreed.
that
The
is true.
question
Okay,
is, that is
Ramana.
agreed. The question is,
Yeah, that is
we
agreed.
have
Yes.
one view that we are going to be using for consumption. For example, I want to connect three tables, join, perform aggregation, perform filtering. Anyway, one view, at least one layer of view I will create. Here the question is, before that view layer, should there be another view layer where every single table has one view? So I have business partner, one view, sales order, one view, sales order item, one view, and then only those views I'll